So my guest today is Karen Massey, a child speech therapist who now works privately for All About Speech Therapy. Karen has over 14 years experience working with children, many of whom have special educational needs, to develop their speech and language. She has published 2 books covering autism and apraxia of speech, as well as communication in Down syndrome at primary school. She set up an independent practice to closely support families, and she was asked to speak to audiences, including the recent Kids to Adults exhibition. So with her wealth of knowledge, I know that this is going to be a really valuable episode for you. It was helpful for me having children at 3 and 5 years old when language is something that they're still developing. So Karen, welcome to the Teachers Podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire.
So I'm excited to talk all things sensory input. So first off then, can you just explain all about what speech therapy actually is and what you do?
Absolutely. So speech therapy covers so many different areas, from being able to attend and listen, first and foremost, to what others are saying and look at what they're doing, through to processing and understanding what it is that others are saying, learning lots of new vocabulary, and then starting to use all that information, all that language yourself to put sentences together for lots and lots of different reasons. And finally, how you actually speak. So pronunciation and making yourself intelligible to others, and lots of other things as well. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you teach it then?
So you can teach speech. So I come right in at the end and I jump straight onto that speech bit, that pronunciation bit, and that actually like the output. And you can teach it in lots of different ways. And typically you would start by using the auditory channel. So you're just going to be talking to the child and you're hoping that they're processing and they're able to imitate you. So if I wanted to teach you to say the sound duh, I'd get in front of you, but I'd just say, right, can you copy me, Claire? Duh. Have a listen. That's all right. Yeah. Duh. Brilliant. Well done. And that's one way of doing it. And it's great if it works. But if it doesn't, then we need to add in our visual channel. So we need to help a child to actually see what's going on when we're talking. And for that, I might get face-to-face, I might sit side by side in front of a mirror, I might use pictures and lots of other things to help them to see what to do, because it gives them extra clues. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes that doesn't work either, and that's when the multi-sensory approach really comes in, and that is what I like to do. So for children who are still struggling and they need that extra help, I will use more tactile support, so hands-on, helping them to actually feel what they're doing and feel their own speech.
I love this. This is so interesting. Thank you. And I love being the child as well. So thanks for that. Okay, so why is it important then that teachers are more familiar? And it's so interesting because I've got a daughter who's 3 in nursery class at school and a daughter who's in year 1. So I'm like, oh my word, this kind of feels like this could be familiar for me. But why is it important that teachers are more familiar with these techniques on developing speech and language? Because we know about phonics, don't we?
Yeah.
But what about speech and language?
Yeah, I think because it's not as uncommon for children to struggle as you might think. We say roughly 1 in 10 children are going to experience some kind of speech, language and communication difficulty. And for some children that will persist. And it's the children where it persists and it goes on into year 1, for example, where all the other children are doing absolutely fine, and the listening and the looking is working perfectly. That's when it's really important that teachers are aware that there are other approaches, there are other things they can do. I actually learned about this from a specialist teacher who was seeing a child for dyslexia, and she was doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things with this child that were very physical and hands-on, because the child wasn't able to start learning her letters, and she couldn't write things down yet, and things weren't sinking in. And the teacher actually explained to me that all she was doing is she was adding in a different sense to her teaching. And I was like, oh wow, it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, and it was fascinating. And then when I went on some training as a speech therapist about sensory input for speech, I was really, really pleased that I had this extra tool in my toolkit. So it is important in school, because we know that children learn in different ways, have different ways of accessing information. And lots of children don't just sit there and listen and sit perfectly still. They actually really come alive and learn their best when things are hands-on and practical. So it's making speech therapy also practical. It's not about getting given a program of paperwork that you've got to sit and kind of work through with a child who is craving that. Can I touch it though? Can you help me feel what to do? Yeah. And it's also important that teachers are aware that there are approaches like this, because it's not something that all of you speech and language therapists will come in and do. So my passion is really to spread the word and let people know that there are alternatives, there are extra things that we can be doing to help these children.
Yeah, there are absolutely different ways to learn, aren't there? Because I remember it was quite a long time ago now, but I actually did my BSL level 1, and the teacher was deaf, but he'd actually he'd had meningitis when he was 18 months, so he did have experience of sounds, because obviously it is different, isn't it? Yeah. And he talked around some of the different ways that they could learn sort of how to form the mouth, and there was a lot of touching the throat going on as well. And I think it could be useful for every child, couldn't it? How many children on average do have a difficulty relating to speech or language?
So at the moment the statistics kind of say 1 in 10. That's like a ballpark figure. And they might be affected in different kinds of areas of speech and language. But if you think about most classrooms, you're going to have 2 or 3 children in the class who are going to be experiencing kind of difficulties in the earlier years.
Yeah. So I suppose really like a whole class approach is just helpful for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's nothing about multisensory input for speech that is detrimental to learning. So everybody can benefit from it. At absolute worst, it just adds more fun to the input. So that's not a bad worst.
No, I love that. So why are you so passionate then about improving speech and language, in pupils?
I'm really passionate because the kind of children that I get to meet are the children where it's not worked so far. So it's affected their confidence. They've got to a point where they've got all the ideas in their brain. They've got loads of fantastic things that they want to say, but they're getting really disheartened, and everybody around them is getting disheartened. And I think if I can do something that is going to improve not just their speech, superficially I'm going to help their speech, but if I can do something that is going to then suddenly change the way they feel about themselves, improve their confidence, the way that they connect with others, how they're perceived, for me that is just something that's amazing. And I don't think I can find something else that would replace that feeling. So for me it's important for them to know that they don't need to give up hope and that there's still another chance to help them.
Yeah. So do you just go into schools and work with children like when a school needs support, or do you actually teach teachers how to do it for themselves as well?
Yeah, so I've done bits of both really. So I've started off very hands-on. Given that I'm talking about practical hands-on approaches, I think it's important to mention that I've got years of actually being there I've been in the classroom, in schools, with children or in their home, and I've worked directly with them, and I've built up a lot of the experience to be able to see what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so I still do an element of that, and I've got a small team of people now who are working alongside me, which is exciting, so we can reach more children in that way. But I'm also passionate about, like I say, spreading the word and helping others to understand it, because obviously that's going to reach and help more children. So now I'm more about writing down what it is that I'm doing and sharing the positive stories and the outcomes, and also delivering training for others to access.
Fantastic. Okay, so you're a teacher right now, and you're listening and you're thinking, oh my word, this is really helpful. How do I find out some more about this? How can I follow Karen? What do I need to do? What are some actionable steps that you can share with a teacher right now that would really help them move things on in their classroom?
So come and reach out to us. So we're all about speech therapy. So if you're, whatever platform you're using, if you were to type in all about speech therapy, that's who we are. And I would say that other things that you can do, apart from obviously come and connect and find out more about what we do, and let's have the conversations, especially if you're working with younger children. A really simple way of getting things hands-on is getting a pot of bubbles, because a pot of bubbles is really versatile for helping with lots and lots of different sounds, and see what your children can do. So if you pop bubbles on their lips, what happens? What sounds can they make with their lips? Can they blow bubbles? Because you'd be surprised at the number of children who really struggle with that activity. And it is, believe it or not, is connected to certain speech sounds that we might need to make, like ooh and whir and shh sounds, different sounds that where we need to move our lips in different shapes. Even down to snack time, things that you can do to support the mouth muscles to get them more prepared. You can play around with how they have drinks. So can they drink with open cups? What do they do when you give them a straw? Do they chew down on the straw, or can they use their lips really nicely to suck up that liquid? So different things that are very, very practical, that you could introduce in the classroom and just see how many children in your class are able to do these things and which ones struggle. And also then obviously come and reach out to us on social media, all about speech therapy. And we'd love to share more with you.
I love that. Thank you. Obviously, so before these chats that we have, we always kind of exchange some notes. So I've got a question. So say, for example, you've got a child who is quite unclear with their speech. In fact, actually, my daughter's language is really, really good. She's 3, but you've got to tune into her. I mean, she's 3. It's common at 3.
Absolutely.
But question then, how do you respond to children, or how should you respond to children when the speech is quite unclear?
So it's really helpful that you try and respond to what they're saying, the content, if you can understand them. Overlook the fact that there might be some speech errors in there. Try and respond to what they're saying, because that is the message that they're wanting to convey to you. And try not to get too hung up on how they're actually saying it. So, yes, they might have some errors in their speech, but can you understand the content? And if you can, respond to them in a positive way. If you can't understand them, it's okay to say, oh, I didn't quite catch that. And there's things that they can do that might help you. So you could ask them, do you mind saying that again? You could try and put the emphasis on you as the listener, being the one that needs a bit of help rather than them as the talker. So, I don't think my ears are working quite well enough today. You might need to say that again, or can you say it louder, or can you say that bit more slowly? Perhaps you can pick out a certain word that you need help with and ask them just to say that word again. And if they are still struggling, or you're struggling to understand them, putting it on you as the listener, ask them to show you. Can you show me what you're saying? As opposed to just telling me, because there might be other clues in the environment that they could use to help you get the message.
Yeah. This is really interesting. So when my eldest was in nursery, what I noticed was in nursery and reception classes, really, she went through this period of self-correction. And over time, obviously, the words became more clear. Yeah. And I'm sure that's probably happening with my 3-year-old. I've just maybe not noticed. But, is there a point where if a child hasn't started that self-correction, that you should do something, and what should you do at that point?
So it's very variable on the situation, like each child's situation, and who is also in that situation with them, whether it's a parent, whether it's a teacher, teaching assistant, somebody who's spends a lot of time with them, and whether or not it's causing a breakdown. I'd say to any parent out there who is thinking that they're starting to get a bit anxious or a bit worried about their child's speech, it's never too early to raise it and put your thoughts out there and speak to someone else and share your concerns. It might be that having a conversation with someone like a teacher, or a health visitor, or somebody who knows a little bit more about communication, it might be that one conversation is enough to reassure you and put your mind at rest. But if it isn't, it's better to do something about it. Speech therapy is not harmful for children. They might not necessarily want it. That's okay. We don't all have to enjoy it, although we try and make it fun. But I'd say definitely act on those gut feelings, because it's better to talk to somebody than to push it to one side. It probably won't go away. Often children, when they're in school, in school education, that kind of 4 or 5-year-olds will be a lot more aware of each other's speech and tune into their, when they're making friends, they'll tune into how others are talking. And often over that reception year in school, a lot of speech errors will resolve. That's when a lot of that self-correction does kick in. And so a child who's got unclear speech at the beginning of that reception year, by the end of it, is very likely to be resolving a lot of their speech difficulties. So I'd say if they're going into year 1 and their speech is still really quite unclear, then they're probably going to need direct therapy. That's when it would be really beneficial, and they're likely to be aware enough and also motivated enough to really take part and engage in therapy so that it is quite quick.
Yeah, I love that, because it's difficult, isn't it? Because we talk about this, but really all children are going through this, so then it can be hard to identify. So I think that's really helpful to know, like, when do we need to think about it more. Fantastic. So we know that you are online. Are you on Twitter or anything? Tell me about your books.
Yeah, so it kind of started with my books. I mean, I've been working as a child speech therapist for a number of years, but when I got to the point where I really wanted to branch out and share with others and let people know what else they can be doing, it started by writing a book. My first book is all about autism and childhood apraxia of speech, which is a bit of a mouthful. Here in the UK, we tend to call it verbal dyspraxia, and it's about when the brain knows exactly what you want to say, but the message gets lost in translation down to the mouth, and the muscles are not coordinated. And so a child can be really unclear. And that's based on a child who I had gone on a journey with, and I'd helped go from being completely nonverbal through to speaking in sentences clearly. So that was the inspiration behind it. There were a lot of other case studies in the book, and that was published almost 2.5 years ago now. And after that, I wanted to keep writing. You get the writing bug once you start. So my second book is all about helping children to speak clearly in primary school when they've got Down syndrome, because we know that typically children with Down syndrome will have a certain profile with their speech, language and communication needs. So that book is intended to help parents and teachers to kind of know roughly what ideas and techniques to be using at different stages within primary school. And I've got a couple more on the go, but I won't say too much more about those, because if you do join me on the social platforms, then you will be hearing about them later this year. But we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, you name it, we're there. Passionate about spreading the word.
Super, thank you. And we'll make sure those are in the show notes, so make sure that I have them then. But yeah, Karen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been such an interesting chat.
Thank you so much, Claire. It's been fabulous joining you and speaking to you all this morning.